For any country that wants to position itself as a gateway to a continent, the existence of a national airline is indispensable. This is not merely about national pride. It's a platform to drive economic growth and deepen connectivity. That was a statement made by the Transport Minister Joseph Boukari Nikpe when he inaugurated the 10-member National Airline Task Force less than a week ago. The main purpose of this task force is to resurrect, as it were, Ghana's once cherished airline. But about 20 years after the collapse of Ghana Airways and the seeming failure of attempted efforts to revive same, is this a priority for now? What has changed? And what needs to be done to make the new conversations fruitful, especially when at the time Ghana's airline was liquidated somewhere in 2004, the chairman then, Sam Jonah, is reported to have said that the airline was in a debt of some $160 million. Hello, good evening, and welcome to Agenda. My name is Beatrice, and tonight we want to talk about the recent efforts by the government to bring back Ghana's airline and whether that is even a conversation that ought to be had within this period as regards priorities for a government now and what modules really are needed. I do have on the panel with me Mr. Francis Kweku Mensah. He's an aviation expert and a businessman. Good evening to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us on Agenda.
Madam. Good evening.
I also do have on my left side Professor Patrick Isuming. He's an economist with the University of Ghana Business School. Prof, great to have you here once again.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here.
Of course, I do as well. My extreme left, Mr. Davis Kobo. He's President, Federation of Associations of Ghanaian Exporters. Good evening to you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us on Agenda as well. And we also do have via video call with us Mr. Sukman, African aviation expert and Chief Operating Officer of XCJet. Good evening to you, sir. Thank you as well for joining us on Agenda tonight.
A pleasure to be here.
Remember that we're streaming live on 3FM 92.7. Send us your comments and we will read them back to you. I want to start with you immediately, Mr. Mensah. The question is, do we need a national airline now?
It's a very difficult question to answer. We need an airline, but must it be a national airline? We had it, and we messed it up. We're trying to bring it back to resurrect it. And I hope we've learned our lessons, because we can't repeat the same mistakes and expect different results.
You hope we have learned our lessons. What mistakes did you recall? I mean, we had our airline in 1958. There were different challenges up until the time I just talked about. In 2004, during the liquidation period, we had about $160 million debt.
Yes, but that for an airline of Ghana Airways' capacity, that wasn't anything to be scared of. Because you have other African airlines who owe much more. For example, Ghana International, that was instituted later, owed about $46 million when it was being liquidated after 4 years. So $160 million for a company which had not seen recapitalization since its inception was doing very well. And we should also remember, we did a lot of expansions across West Africa. We flew to the United States, we were flying to the UK, to Germany, and all these expansions were never backed by cash. Unlike the other airlines who are doing well, I think we'll have the opportunity to talk about Ethiopian Airlines
Kenya,
and what the others are doing. Ghana Airways didn't see that. So these are some of the lessons that are to be learned.
So for you, before I move on to the other panelists, just your preliminary comment, what you're saying is that it may be necessary only if you think at this point we've learned our lessons.
Absolutely.
I'm coming to you, Professor Patrick Isuming. I mean, you've seen our economic challenges. Currently, we are under an IMF program, and we have a government that says that as part of a national development, this is an area I want to look at as well. Is it a viable venture this time that you think the government should be encouraged to go ahead with?
Well, I think that we have to think in terms of a broader strategy. And we have to be convinced what is the strategy. I don't think that we want to just set up a national airline for setting up a national airline sake and saying that, oh, we too have a national airline. I think it's good to have the pride of it and to say now finally we have our airline back and we can fly wherever we want with more convenience. But I think however great that feeling will be, I think it's absolutely important that, we have a strategy. We have whether we have a tourism strategy, we have a long-term aviation strategy, and this fits into there's a clear positioning for opening, not just that we just want to open a national
You wouldn't
airline.
think that the setting up of that task force, the 10-member task force, which includes the former transport minister, deputy transport minister, and a few other people, perhaps should be, the team that is setting up the roadmap very clearly for us moving forward?
So, I think what I'm trying to say is not about who we have set up, who is leading the committee or who is part of the task force that has been set up. What I'm saying is that, we can't just do things haphazardly. I know there's been several attempts to bring that, to bring the national airline back. It hasn't happened yet. If we shouldn't feel obliged that we have to have a national airline, if it doesn't make economic sense, if the numbers don't add up, or we shouldn't bring it up because we just get up and we feel. But we've been talking about the gateway strategy. We've been talking about being the hub, and I think if we fit into the broader discussion about where we want to take the aviation, I think then we can bring it back with all the other caveats that I'm sure will come up in the course of the discussion.
And I will be coming to you, Mr. Kobo, very shortly, but I want to get quickly the thought of Mr. Sukman, who is the Chief Operating Officer, XCJet. I want to find out from you, you were saying earlier that your company is based in Nigeria. Nigeria has also had its own turbulence, and now you seem to have fairly, good aviation system, as it were. How do you see Ghana moving forward in these discussions with its latest effort to want to establish something that it links really to the national development of the country?
I just want to pick up on the theme already set by my two other colleagues on the panel. It's good that we're not sugarcoating this. It's good that people are openly saying, we had it once and we messed it up. That's music to my ears, because we have to be realistic. The second colleague also mentioned that, we need robust business plans, etc., etc. So it's really good to hear the local thinking back in Accra on the same, we're all on the same page with regards to this. Just to take it back and talk about Nigeria for a moment, again, a very fiercely competitive market, a very complicated market. The advantage you've got in Accra is you've pretty much got a greenfield site to redraw the aviation map there. Nigeria has its own challenges, and we live those challenges every day and work within those challenges every day. I think there is the angle of national pride. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I think, as the previous panelist said, we have to go into this with our eyes wide open. There has to be a proper business analysis done. And to be honest, XJet Group, we have a number of different interests and operations. We just recently launched Air Sierra Leone out in Freetown on behalf of local investors. So basically, we know the dynamics behind the West African market, and the key is a thorough business plan, a clear strategy over the short, medium and long term, because of course that feeds the business plan and the financing and the capital requirements and funding of the airline. And you need a proper, strong, credible management team. We can't throw it all away again by having let's just leave it at unqualified people running the carrier, because the losses can amount very, very quickly.
So then let me ask you, and that's a point that Professor Patrick Isuming also made earlier about the need to have a proper strategy. You're also looking at, just putting it in a different word, that we need to have the right structures in place. Immediately, what comes off your mind with this beginning stages of conversations that we're having after 20 years of this business being down?
We've got to remember Aviation has developed in Ghana massively in that 20-year void period. I think it was also the John Mahama administration, the previous administration, that put forward this beautiful KIA airport infrastructure project, and that's been delivered. Unfortunately, that's not been utilised by Ghanaian carriers as much as it should have been, purely because of the absence of credible Ghanaian operators. And so all of those routes, all of those networks, all of that traffic has been seized by foreign carriers. So the biggest threat I see to any business plan or any business model is your market's already been saturated. How do you stage a comeback and compete with the likes of Emirates, MBA, and ET, for example? That's going to be one of the biggest items I would put at the top of the risk assessment and business planning process.
And that's a question, as it were, that will develop going into this conversation deeper. But I'm coming to you, Mr. Kobo. You are with the Association that Exports. What does this conversation mean to you? First, if you're able to briefly tell us what it's been for the associations, for instance, without a national airline, and how you perceive this conversation, perhaps if it becomes fruitful, could change the narrative for you.
Okay, so let me start and also comment on what my big brother said here. For it has its own turbulence. I mean, Ghana Airways, but for a business that never saw any recapitalization for years, leaving the debt of 160 million, I don't think there should be a problem. But the question here is, why do we need a national airline? Is it because of the pride or a strategy or a focus? Why do we need it?
We had the president when the committee was set up,
exactly.
That it's linked to national development.
It's linked to national development. That is where we come in as exporters. For your information, the 2023 alone, the exporters, we did over $3.9 billion in non-traditional crops alone. That tells you that if we had a national airline, the amount of money that would be paid to these national airlines would have been huge. So this is a strategy and focus. And that's the more reason why for us, we are interested that the national airline should come. But then, is the focus for passengers or just for cargo? These are the things we need to weigh in, because President really said it, that is for national development. So if it's for development, what is the mileage when you pick a passenger as against cargo? And these are some of the things we need to look at. If you look at our current export volumes and what we pay today, the minimum we pay currently is about $1,000 a ton. The minimum.
To other airlines that you use for your business.
And even with a whole struggle. So as an exporter, I would have loved to have my national airline where there will be some perks. Maybe the ground rent and other things will be minimized for me to pay maybe $70, $80 per kilo, which translates to about between 800 and $700 to $800.
Is it not too early to be talking about pegs?
It's not peg. I don't want to use the word peg, because we need to be competitive. There's one thing of setting it up and the other of being competitive for us to be able to move volumes. Because once you move volumes, then that is when you don't leave the airline to be idle. And so these are some of the things, the discussions I want to pick at. And like I said, we are exporting fruits and vegetables almost every day. Currently, when you look at the world, we are leading in the world with $54 billion plus a year.
Yam exportation.
Yam exportation alone in the world, we are leading. It's second by Jamaica, doing $52 million. If you look at our pineapple Sankofa is gone because of this competition where we are unable to compete with the other countries. So, but our farmers are there, the structures are there for us to be able to increase volume and push it. So is it the case, the reason why we advocating for the airline? And the answer is yes, because if we have our own cargo, it's going to move volume. So for me, it's the strategy and the focus is what I'm looking at, the direction. Not just because of pride, because everybody, Ethiopia Airline is there, Kenya Airline is there, we just want to have an airline. So the issue here is a big no, it's strictly for us business. So
let me get clarity from the line of submissions that you're making, or the argument you're making. Do I hear you say that perhaps we need to concentrate more on goods that are getting out of the country than passengers?
Of course, yes. Because for me, we need a balance. And if we need a balance, let's look at how much the passenger gives us, the profit margins, as against goods. And this is what we need to look at. Because let's look at COVID. During the COVID time, the flights were not coming. So the few flights that were coming, Virtually these flights were even passenger flights, but they had to cave in the seas and pick cargo where we were not even getting space. You understand me? But the question here is, they did mathematics and so look, maybe if I pick passenger against cargo, I make more money on cargo than passenger. And since then, all of a sudden, our how do you call it, freight went up, and it has never gone down again.
Let me get your quick thoughts on it, Mr. Mensah, the argument or the submission given by Mr. Kobo, yeah. and then I would ask you my next question. Just your quick reaction to that.
I agree very much with Mr. Kobo and what Prof said. You need a strategy, and then the strategy must be backed by expertise action. For example, he mentioned about cargo, whether it's about cargo or passengers. No, it's about both. But probably we should start with a narrow-body aircraft to cut down our initial losses. Ghana International made a mistake by using an inadequate equipment, by flying the whole 4 or 5 years with a narrow-body aircraft where your break-even point on your load factors are very, very high. So as soon as you don't hit certain breaking points, you'll be making losses. And they didn't find it necessary to change equipment. And that was based on bad decisions. Which was
part of the reasons U.S. banned us at a certain point.
No. Ghana International was flying to London, but with a wrong aircraft. But coming to Mr. Na's point, you can balance your revenue through passengers and cargo. And sometimes you see that the cargo yield is even higher than certain passenger percentages. So you need to look at both. But as said, you need to strategize how to start, what you want to do, the monies or the capital you have, and then grow into a big scale operation.
And this is where I come to my next question. Earlier, you were talking about the need for us to learn from our lessons. And we've seen the challenges, even the attempts to want to revive our airline.
Yeah.
After 2004, then between 2005 and 2010, and then we had a conversation again in 2020. We don't know where that went. How do you think, based on the challenges, and I know you've been in the industry for a very long time,
yep.
even having your own within the aviation sector,
yes.
How do we look at those challenges compared with how our neighbors like Kenya and the rest did it, so that this time around it becomes a fruitful conversation that yields positive results?
First of all, the business plan must make sense. It must be capitalized, and management must have the free hand to take decisions, not to take any suboptimal commercial decisions that normally emanates from the governments. Kenya made that experience at the beginning, and later they realized that they needed to really enforce management and also empower management to take decisions pertaining to the airline. And at a point in time, the airline even sacked some board members of the airline we were appointed by the government. And look at where they are now. They made some big strides. Ethiopia Airlines went through the same pipeline, and then look at where they are now. So if we don't have good management who have all the authority to take all commercial decisions that a prospering business deserves, we will come back to square one.
I want to come to you, Mr. Mann, before I come to the rest of my panel in studio here. You started talking a little bit about Nigeria's situation. Every country's structures are different, even in terms of our economic strengths. From where you sit, really, what should Ghana really be looking at in order to make this venture more profitable, beyond what you said earlier about that overall structure and what Professor Suming also said earlier about a strategy, which Mr. Mensah has also emphasized a bit more on?
I think all of these points are interlinked. You can't isolate one from the other. Ghana has a lot going for itself. I've worked in Ghana on a number of projects over the last 20 odd years, and I see the potential in Ghana. And I'm sorry, I can't remember everybody's name. I can't see on the screen. But the colleague that mentioned cargo is absolutely right. You know, the rates that Ghanaian exporters are paying are extortionate. And of course, that's always because the foreign carriers take advantage, because there's a lack of local response from local carriers. So they naturally put up the prices. I think when you look at the merits that Ghana is going for it over, say, Nigeria, for example, you've got fantastic infrastructure. KIA is a world-class airport. You've got a very stable economic environment. You don't have issues with currency export and paying foreign bills, etc., etc. But they're the key hindrances of the Nigerian market, let's say. So you would enter the scene, let's put it this way, with a lot of advantages, which normally choke airlines. So that's a major plus for Ghana. Again, you know, it's that, and I'm glad another colleague, again, forgive me with the names, has picked up on that. You know, you need an independent management team, otherwise, you know, it's toast before we've started. So basically, you know, the independence has to be planning, and adhering to the business plan has to be on point. So all of these items are interrelated, and I think, you know, so far this is a healthy debate.
And I want to ask you this question about, because there was a point you made earlier about competitiveness and how this whole space has changed over the period. There's an article written by an energy expert who was a one-time presidential hopeful with the Exwell administration. And this is what he said. I just want to read a bit of it to you. He said, "We need to understand a few key points regarding all business ventures. Private businesses seek profitable opportunities, and the return on investment must be positive. If the private sector is not lining up with proposals to undertake a venture, and the government has to solicit their involvement, then there is likely a catch." He asks some questions. He says, let's pose a few questions. In this competitive airline market, can a new national airline fly to Dubai cheaper than Emirates, London cheaper than British Airways, Amsterdam cheaper than KLM, Ethiopia cheaper than Ethiopian Airways? Having posed these questions, what I'm asking you is, we've spoken about strategy and all of that. How do we make it a reality in the face of these, this stiff competition that we already have in existence?
Yeah, I alluded to this earlier. You know, we are behind the curve. We are going up against competition that have really entrenched themselves on these routes. BA owns the routes to London. Simple. They're flying to Gatwick from Accra. They're flying to Heathrow from Accra. I think the last time I heard, I think they're up to about 12 flights a week. So how do we go up against that? I mean, they've got lots of positives already. They're reliable. The diaspora market trusts them. The key business travellers from Accra trust them, and you know, they've got huge fleets, BA 350 plus aircraft. One aircraft goes technical, they'll deploy a second aircraft on that route within, you know, prepping it within an hour. So, you know, we're going to be playing catch up, and that's why it's important to look at the strategy. You know, we have to start small, be it domestic, possibly growing into the regional markets in the first 1 to 2 to 3 years, and then really look at value-adding routes. You can't just fly somewhere because it's glamorous. That's the quickest way to close your airline, because the losses will amount so quickly. And as you say, can we do it cheaper? These airlines do it because they have scale. Yeah, economies of scale. We have very, very high capital-intensive overhead costs in aviation, and you know, even the regulatory costs of holding all the post holders together and having that regulatory environment fulfilled is costly. So that strategy is key, and I think, you know, if we do go down the road of setting up the carrier, it's going to be a very, very long journey. Emirates took like 20, 30 years to evolve to where it is today. So did ET. And let's not forget Kenya Airways, how much money the government has lost over the last 15 years on Kenya Airways. So they've had very deep pockets, also that sense of national pride to keep that airline going. So, you know, regional carriers even, and certainly international carriers are not born and created overnight. They are nurtured over time. So that strategy again, and the funding requirements behind that strategy are very, very key. If we get that wrong, you know, we're going to be loss making very, very quickly. I'm not being negative. I'm actually positive. I know the potential. I know the potential for West Coast Africa. They've done it in the East. We keep talking about Kenya. For them, based upon sound economic principles, a sound business plan, and sourcing of economic aircraft. So all these things have to be sort of factored in. So I wouldn't say it's undoable. I wouldn't say it certainly can be done. I would just want to exercise caution that, you know what, do your planning properly and be realistic. I think there is a space in West Africa for a West African hub airline. You've got the infrastructure, you've got the perfect economy there. Out of all your neighboring companies, you know, Ghana is a very, very special place. There is this place for national carriers, starting domestic and regional, no issues. I think the broader ambitions of international have to be very, very calculative and delivered precisely as per your business plan.
And I'm coming to you, Professor Patrick Isuming, because I hear Mr. Mann say that be realistic, do your plans properly. I also heard him earlier kind of giving us the understanding that we need to learn how to walk before we run, so one step at a time. What do you see with all these things happening? Because now, and I also get the understanding that don't assume that within the shortest period of time you're going to, you know, get all the resources you need. And yet, if you look at the statement that came from the presidency, this whole idea is linking to national development. And this is a presidency, for instance, that has just 4 years. What do you see?
Well, I think, yes, the presidency might be for only 4 years, but I think having a broader long-term plan, having a bigger national vision, I think is very important. Because if you wanted to do this for only a 4-year period, you might as well shut a shop and then go to bed. I think, you know, as we've heard, you know, the airline, the industry is extremely capital intensive. And, you know, sometimes at the beginning, it will be tough. And, you know, you may well not break even for a while. But I think the most important thing is you have a sound business plan, you have a clear strategy, and you are sticking to it, and you are following. And then you are not being derailed. And I'm glad that we've mentioned, he has mentioned more emphatically the issue about management and decision-making. For me, I think that's where my biggest worry sits. You have to look at look at all the SOEs we have, and look at how they are performing, and look at the reports we see from SIGA. And
that was the first thing that the president really targeted when he was sworn into office. Absolutely,
and I think that's so when I look at that, and then we all agree that it's important that the management has to be top-notch. You have to have experts, and they have to have free hand to make sound business decisions. And in the current the environment that we are in, I worry. I think,
how do you mean?
I mean, I think I struggle to see that. Well, so let's see what kind of consortium, what kind of arrangement we will have. But if it's an arrangement where the state, the government has any role in terms of decision making about how the entity is going to run, who is going to appoint leadership and so on, then I will be really concerned. Because I think, we have seen enough to know that when it comes to politicians making those kind of decisions to appoint people to lead SOEs, generally it doesn't go well. It's, I don't think it's fair to say that we hardly ever get the experts to run the entities. If that happens, it's usually in the minority, not in the majority. And I think that's, so I want to see exactly what the structure will be, the shareholding structure will be, the decision-making structure will be, what role would the state have?
But based on what you said so far, I seem to get the idea that you already have perhaps a picture of what kind of management system that we should put in place? Are you able to share that with us?
Well, I think for me, the most important thing is insulating the decision-making and the management processes from any political interference. Yeah. Any arrangement that ensures that, we have professionals and experts who are making the decision purely on business basis, without any fear of, that a change of party is not going to have, people are not going to feel threatened, and people are given the free hand to make day-to-day business decisions purely on the merit of running a business, without, any political interference. For me, I think that's going to be crucial.
And I'll be coming to you very shortly, Mr. Mensah, but I realized that you were nodding to what Professor Patrick Isuming was saying. What else do you have to add to it?
I think for me, I've always have this notion that government doesn't have business doing business. And why am I saying this? Because, again, I want to thank him for what he just said, because the issue here is what sort of arrangements are we going to have? They have shared holding structures and other things, because if it's going to be 70 for government and 30 for the I beg to differ, then we better don't even start. Because the issue here is the private sector will be more better leading it than government. And again, insulating it from any political interference is one of the biggest things I think that I also want to, because it doesn't matter what it is, it doesn't matter what money we put in. If we don't insulate it from political interference, then that becomes a big problem for us. Because the issue here is the strategy we are looking at, and what focus, what direction do we want to do. And these are most of the things we need to. But I also believe that in every business, you need to have a sound business plan. You need to know what your end results want to be before you even start. So I assume that before the president even made those pronouncements, maybe they've weighed all these pros and cons to see that, look, we've had difficulties in the previous Ghana Airways, so we don't want to encourage that again. So we want to have some sort of PPP where government just have about 5-10% shares, because the issue here is government is supposed to create an enabling environment, and they have the biggest purse. And until they spend, the private sector can never be viable. So once they are putting in that purse, then the private sector sets in to drive it.
And when we come back, we'll be talking about the private sector involvement. What kind of percentage, 40, 60, 70, 30, what exactly and how that should be pursued? Stay with us.
When the sun rises, there is hope. While this hope lingers on, the citizens look up to the government, the economy, the national development agenda, and everything in between. On Ghana Tonight, it's our utmost priority to bring you insightful conversations on the economy, break down the biggest issues while setting the agenda for transformation and national development. The big and important stories are treated from the human interest angle, while the facts and the figures are painted with precision. So now, let's cut the convention and start the conversation here on Ghana Tonight. I am your host, Alfred.
You're still here on Agenda on TV3. My name is Beatrice. Tonight we're talking about the revived conversations around whether or not there's a need for Ghana to bring back its airlines, which were grounded about some 20 years ago. And I do have on the panel with me Mr. Kojo Kweku Mensah. He's an aviation expert as well as a businessman. If you're just joining us, we also do have with us Professor Patrick Isuming. He's an economist with the University of Ghana Business School. We do have with us Mr. Davis Kobe. He is President, Federation of Associations of Ghanaian Exporters. We have a video call as well. Sukman, he's with African Aviation. He's an African aviation expert and Chief Operating Officer of XCJet. I'll just read a few of your comments to you and then we'll continue with the conversation. Yabua Benjamin says, national airline is a must. We also have Kwesi Opon Busu, who says, Kweku Mensah is my brother with a high knowledge of aviation, watching live from New York City. Okay. We do have as well Nana Yao Yok. He says, good evening, TV3 Ghana and team. And I'll read the last one to you before we continue with the conversation. I live in USA. Sometimes when I'm coming to Ghana, I see myself in some country airlines and I feel bad because I can't see a lot of Ghanaians on the flights. All this money can go to our country. However, we're giving it to other countries. Hope this will happen, meaning that he's also looking forward to a national airline. But I'm coming to you, Mr. Mensah. One of the things that came up before we went on the break was whether or not there is a need to have certain level of private sector participation in this. In the first place, we need to attract them. How do we make this whole venture and conversation attractive in the first place to them?
The success of an airline, especially in our hemisphere, is based on who participates. And private participation is key, so that it will be managed commercially. Like I said, we've had the experience of Ghana Airways where decisions were suboptimal, and the management had no say. We had good people, we still have them in the system. We had good pilots, good engineers, good marketing people, they're still there, but they couldn't perform because of the control that the politicians had on the airline. For example, the equipment we were using, we were flying DC-10 at that time. I think when the DC-10 came on, it was viable. But then came in other aircraft, for example, Airbus 330, Boeing 767s, that consumed less, much less. Just to put in perspective, a DC-10 consumed 9,000 kilograms of kerosene per block hour, whereas our competitors were flying A330s, their aircraft consuming 5,500 and 6,000. So already there, you are losing. And the capacity was almost the same. But then it was not changed because the powers that be didn't want to do that. And we know that, for example, British Midland came in at a point to give us equipment, A330s and Fokker 100s, to make our operations profitable and also reliable, because they were newer aircraft as against the older ones we were flying. But at a point in time, they weren't entertained and they left, you know. So these are the key issues. Aviation or airline business is very profitable, even that the Lufthansa's and the KLM's and the British Airways wouldn't be posting 1-point-something billion profits all the time. But it depends on the strategies they're using. We could have ours. Mr. Mann spoke, or I think Mr. Na spoke about whether we could compete with them price-wise. The fares KLM and Consort are charging now, we can compete with them if we had the right strategy. We needn't fly direct to London, like Mr. Mann said. We could start in the sub-region, build on our brand, and then getting to Europe, maybe choose 2 points. Instead of flying directly to go to Germany before London, instead of, not like British Airways is doing with their huge custom. We realized that also when we were flying to the States. At a point, we realized it was profitable to do a stop in Banjul, pick up passengers there to Washington. You know, these are commercial decisions that real and tested managers would take, but a politician might not understand or would have his own idea about the whole thing. And that should be looked at. If we want to attract foreign investors or foreign investment as we will need in this case, then we should have our act right. The business plan must be solid, and the management team that will be running the business plan must be known to be insulated from all political decisions and interferences. Other than that, we ain't going nowhere.
Other than that, we are not going anywhere. Mr. Sumi, what do you have to add to what Mr. Mensah is telling us as regards how we can attract the kind of investments that we need to be able to start off right?
Well, I think, as Mr. Mann said, you know, the opportunities are there. And then businesses are just looking for, you know, where there are opportunities. But at the same time, the environment has to be right. You know, they obviously come to commit their capital, and they need to be sure that, you know, decision making is going to be right. So I think it's important that the arrangement seems right, and that, you know, clearly, so the opportunities are there. The environment looks fertile. If they see that, you know, this arrangement will be such that, you know, there's not going to be much political interference, and the management is going to be sound. I don't think it's far-fetched for any, you know, business entity to come up with, to work together to put together a solid business plan that will work in this environment. But if they realize that, you know, and we also have a history. We have a history of how we've run our two, you know, previous national airlines. So I think now they will come they will be cautious, and they will they will want to see all the safeguards, the necessary safeguards to ensure that, look, when we commit our funds to this, it's going to be run professionally. So I think once they get the impression that the government is serious about doing a sound business, I'm sure we're already very attractive. And
having spoken about how we manage our staff, bearing in mind what we experienced previously, Mr. Kobe, what do you have to say as regards how we can do things better? Because previously we had stories of passengers who were stranded, some for days, and, you know, obviously, if there is a better option, I will choose the better option over my own airline if it is not delivering up to that professional level.
I think for me, like my two big men said, there should be a clear cut from day one. We should be able to define exactly what we want to do in respect to management and shareholding. Because the issue about the past was because of the way the whole thing was managed. Because I don't think that you get the likes of KLM that will have backlogs for about 6 months without clearing people, and just handpick those they want to fly on the airline. That is not what we want now, and it's simply because it wasn't insulated from politics. Because one, you have political intervention, it becomes difficult for you to manage things well, and that's the more reason why some of us are looking at the PPP and the sort of shareholding. Because for me, if Prof said it right, that look, the business community are looking for business to do, the private sector, but it depends on what they see, what the cut-off points are before they put in money. Because for now, you can't just tell them that, look, government is going to have 80% and anybody want to put in their money, looking at the history we had in the past. So I think these are some of the things we need to look at. And also look at the strategy we are using, get the focus. What exactly do we want to the airline to focus on? The balance. Is it the passengers? Are we looking at the cargo? Are we also flying the regional, starting the regional, or we just want to go straight to the international, which for, of course, some of us won't advise. Let's crawl before we start walking. So these are some of the things I think that we should put in place.
I'm coming to you, Mr. Mann, if you can hear me. I know that earlier you talked about a structure in place and, you know, ensuring that we're doing things right from the start, learning how to walk before we run. We've had the panel members, 3 of them here in the studio, saying there's a need to detach whatever it is we want to do from political influence. How do we balance that influence, as it were, and having independent minds running such a venture that we are hoping will bring us some money for national development in the long run?
This is the $1 million question, and I'm listening to the fellow panelists, and I'm just sitting here nodding my head at everything they say. I think we're all on the same page. I just want to elaborate a little bit further that, you know, I don't think PPP is going to work, especially with the history that we've had in Ghana specifically. And look at what they tried to do with Nigeria Air in Nigeria some years ago. I don't think we're ready for PPP in aviation because it's too short-termism. Let me explain that. Parties change every 4 or 8 years. An investor who's going to put millions and millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars into a venture, the political risk is just too high. So I think that this needs to be a binary operation. When I mean binary, it means one or the other. It either needs to be 100% funded by the government and run by an independent management team, or you nurture your private sector in Ghana and try and encourage them to carry the flag, so there'll be flag carriers, not national carriers, to carry the flag on international routes. I don't think you can mix the two because there's distrust, there's a lingering factor about parties changing, political parties changing power every 4 or 8 years, and you know, the business continuity. I think that's going to be a big question mark for any investors that are trying to put money in. It either has to be fully 100% government or it has to be fully independent and private investors. You've got Africa Wealth, for example. You've got another 2-3 airlines there with their AOCs. They can be encouraged to fly on international or regional sectors at their own commercial risk. The government, if we do go down that road of private operators, of course the enabling environment and support from the government should be there to stimulate and encourage the fleets to be invested in and routes for the diversification of routes. But at this stage, guys, it worries me when we talk about PPP, to be honest.
Let me get clarity from you very briefly. We're just running out of time. You're looking at if the government has to sponsor 100%. This is a government that is already under an IMF program, doesn't have enough money. I don't know when you talk about independent investment. But again, I also want to take you back to our history a little bit, where at a point the country or the government at the time even partnered with South Africa. We know that still didn't work. With these 3 options, I'm talking about partnering with other countries that already have airlines that are working, and your independent suggestion, obviously with the current economic state, I don't know how realistic the government sponsoring this 100% is. Where do you think is the most realistic at this very stage where we are?
I think you should put it out of your mind that you're being funded by IMF. Most emerging markets are. I think the business case for this carrier, however it is funded, and I'm alluding to actually national carrier, it has to be robust. Now you've got people like Charles Asari on the team. I've worked with Charles in the past when he was at GACL. I know that the man is serious, and you know, if there's anything that he can do is to run an independent feasibility study. I think there's nothing wrong with taking IMF money or whatever funding sources and putting it into a project as long as it's sound and robust and executed to the letter as per the business plan. So my point was, you can't mix the two. You can't mix the private sector investment with a government sector and equity shareholding. It just wouldn't work. And I'm saying that as somebody who's very passionate about African aviation and a love for Ghana. I think it can be done. It's a common theme. We've been saying it since the beginning of the program. We just need to be serious and very business-like about this. Whilst it may be funded by government, it has to be run independently by an independent and experienced management team.
And let me just read these comments, and I'll take your final words on the panel here. Zach Zom says, how did Ghana Airways go bankrupt? And some politicians are wicked. There's Big Man Manifest. It says, it's a good move. How did Togo do it? They started gradually and today. Okay, and then he says, Ghana will survive in these airline businesses. We only need effective and efficient management and to handle with productive strategies. So kind of sharing the same views with our panel here. In like 30 seconds, if you can tell us really your final thoughts as regards the way forward.
I think the way forward for me is to, again, re-echo the management issue, because for us as exporters, we definitely need a national airline for us to be able to compete. But the issue here is, are we able to do it right? The competition is key, so it's up to government to decide whether we have to insulate it from politics or not. And the answer, the best bet for us to insulate it from politics and make sure it works.
Professor Sumi, your final word.
Yeah, I think I want to pick up from the conversation about the IMF and being an IMF program. I mean, I can easily see the IMF saying, objecting to such a venture, because especially if it's fully government owned. But, you know, if you have the strategy and you have the correct business plan, it's going to work. Let's do what we feel will work for our country. And then let's go ahead with it.
Be bold and pursue it if you think it would work. Mr. Mensah, your final thoughts.
Yes, I think the strategy is key, the business plan and its management. We've made the experience. We had it a couple of times. It is there. What makes me a bit comfortable is the people, one or two people in this committee. Mr. Selby is such an experienced regulator that he would know what not to do, at least. And then you have the GCA man on that team too, who is also experienced. And there's no gainsaying that we need to have learned our lessons.
We need to have learned our lessons. Let me get the final word from you, Mr. Mann. In like 30 seconds, what would you want to say as we progress in this conversation?
I think we go for it, we keep an open mind, and everything hinges on the outcome of that feasibility study. But I think we should embrace it for me.
We should embrace it. Thank you so much, Sukman, African aviation expert. He's also the Chief Operating Officer of ExeJet. Of course, we've had with us in studio here Mr. Francis Kweku Mensah. He's an aviation expert and a businessman. Thank you, sir, for joining us on Agenda tonight. We've had Professor Patrick Isuming on my immediate left. He is an economist with the University of Ghana Business School. Thank you as well, Paul, for joining us. And of course, Mr. Davis Nanene Kobo, who is President, Federation of Association of Ghanaian Exporters. Thank you as well for joining us on Agenda tonight. My name is Beatrice. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. Join us again next week. Have a good evening.